What's up, people? Mr. B, as usual. And today, I want to spend a few minutes just to talk about some publications that I have, and I'm inviting you to support. Of course, we are looking at the writings from Mr. B. And let me just get a little taste here. Here we go. Unbroken, Sheila 2.0. So let's talk about writing and my writing. Because one of the things that I have been paying a lot more attention to is writing the Jamaican experience. And of course, you're familiar with me with my um, podcasts, the art and so on. But a little secret, my writings. And so I have a couple of books out, and we're gonna talk about them quickly today. You can check these books out on the website at yardmedia.com. That's YAAWD media.com. Now, I central to where I am is the importance of owning our history. I really believe that over the years we've not really paid a lot of attention to to documenting our experiences. And all of us, as we go through life, what you're doing is creating little bits and pieces of history that somewhere down the road somebody take it and decide that they're going to write your story. And so I've been writing for a number of years. And so I have 5 books that are out. In fact, 2 that I just got an initial delivery of, which are my 2 newest publications. We're going to talk about that today. And these are the these 2 books are as follows: Scotchman of Dreams and The Men We Become. And again, these are essentially Jamaican stories. I really strongly believe in taking ownership of our experiences and writing our own stories. And so we're going to talk about that quickly today. Now, just to set the tone here, I, for one, try to write the Caribbean diaspora the way that it is lived: raw, ambitious, funny, painful, and of course, relentlessly human. And so these stories of mine track the migrations that we inherit and the reinventions we are forced to make, the island roots that shape us, the cities that test us, and the identities that we build in between. Now, let's talk about the men we become. Um, One of my most recent pieces, Men We Become, is a powerful exploration of masculinity, memory, and survival in the Caribbean and its diaspora. Um, the characters, there are 4 of them, and try to make them as deeply human as possible. You know, Characters shaped by personal experiences: poverty, ambition, love, loss. And this novel examines how men or boys are molded into men by circumstance and the personal cost of the choices they make along the way. So these 4 men are they are strangers to each other: Andrew, Stuart, Keith, and Ralston. They live in the United States, having migrated um, into the US some 20 plus years earlier. They don't know each other. They are in different states. Um, Andrew lives in New Jersey. Keith lives in Florida. Ralston, who is a chef, lives in Maryland, and Stuart, who lives in Georgia. And so, they each have their experiences. They come to America as teenagers, early 20s, thereabouts, and they're all into their 60s. And so, after living in America for 30, 40 years, they're now realizing that you know, a lot of the stuff that we had set out to accomplish, we really never accomplished that. And so they're at different stages of getting older. Um, one in particular, Keith lost his wife, the love of his life, somebody he was married to for over 30 odd years, and he basically just never moved on. He has kept the house the same way as it was the day before she passed on. And this woman had died more than 2 years previously. You know, he sleeps on one side of the bed, just to give you a little thing. This is somebody who has built his entire life around. And so starting, he had never even considered starting one. So his children is, I don't know, pestering him and saying, hey, you need to snap out of it. You know, you know, she's gone, she's not coming back. And you need to get on with your life. You know, he's a pharmacist, so not exactly somebody who is destitute, but he has just gotten to that point. And so they encourage him to go on a cruise, to, you know, and them set up this cruise for him. All he needs to do is to sign up and go on a cruise, a four-stop cruise, 8 days at sea, that is going to take him from Florida to Nassau, Bahamas, down into Aruba, then over to St. Lucia, and the last stop of the cruise is Montego Bay, Jamaica. He hasn't been to Jamaica in decades. I have no idea what Jamaica looked like, the transformation. And so he's contemplating this thing. On the other hand, there is Keith. Keith is a successful mechanic. Nice little mechanic shop, live in a Lauderhill in Florida. But he has had 5 different relationships that has produced, well, 4 of which have produced children for different mothers, never married. And so, you know, he is essentially a lifelong bachelor. And he, the father of 4, fears that he will never become the steady man that his children deserve. And so you're seeing the conundrum here. And then they now are inviting him to, listen, go up on a cruise, just for the, you know, to try find yourself. And of course, as you know, we're Jamaican man, you know, so we're not like nobody tell us anything. And that's what this story is about. It's a story about us as Jamaican men. We're aging. It's about aging. It's about coming to terms with your own mortality. It's about love and loss. It's about accomplishments or the lack of it. It's about how you see yourself in this late stage. And of course, there's Ralston, who is a top chef in one of the finest restaurants in Baltimore, Maryland. But Ralston can caress every sensibility out of a stalk of scallion and a ball of onion. Him can make a steak feel like you're in a heaven. He make a pot of soup that you fall down, right? But him don't know how to maintain a relationship with, you know, and so his wife basically drift away from him with her 2 children, both of whom are professionals. And so he is learning, by the way, that he now have 2 grandchildren that he don't know, because he just never developed those skills and shut out his family. And then of course there is Andrew, who has been divorced 3 times, and you know, 3 different marriages, and the wife then clean him out. And so he is literally in a starting over mode as well. And so all 4 have children within their network who, despite all of their misgivings, those kids still believe in them and is encouraging them go up on the cruise. And so the 4 of them, unknown to each other, independent of each other, sign up for this cruise. that is leaving out of Miami. And so the four board the ship. They don't know each other. And so over time, as the ship, sail along on its route, they come into contact with each other and eventually start to talk. And so it's four different stories being told through their own voices. It's about building friendships. It's about, connecting with other people that you find that you're able to trust. And this story is about the men that we become. What does it really mean to be a man? What defines that standard? The book asks these difficult questions. And what part of ourselves do we lose as men in the pursuit of finding answers to these questions? This is a novel that I, try to make both intimate and universal, one that resonates across generations and cultures, and it speaks directly to men who really see their inner lives reflected on the page. Check out the book, right? yardmedia.com. The book is also available on amazon.com, but if you go to my website at yardmedia.com, that's YAAWD media.com, you can pick up an autographed copy. And just so you know, the Jamaica Brew at the end of this month, right here in Florida, I will be reading at Jamaica Brew on this is the last day of the month. It's a Saturday. So if you're in South Florida and you want to have a one-on-one, visit that. Now, the second book that is in this new release series is Scotch Bonnet Dreams. And again, Jamaican stories. And we try to tell these stories based on, the experiences that we have, right? Scotch Bonnet Dreams. In the quiet bustle of four-pass Clarendon, Winston sits across from Delhi, anxious, hopeful, and desperate for a way out. Delhi slides a dead man's passport across the table, its untouched US visa gleaming like forbidden treasure. One decision, one document, one chance to rewrite his future. This risky meeting becomes the first step in Winston's dangerous journey to New York City, where survival, hustle, and destiny awaits. So this is Winston Beckford, who buys a dead man's passport and he journeys to New York on this. This is the 1990s, when it would have been a lot easier for you to do something like that. And so he lands in New York, essentially no papers because he posed as somebody else. And he has an accident, which the job he has sees him working on a construction site. He falls off a building and decides that this is too dangerous. And so let me play a little synopsis here. It's an AI generated. Let me thank my son Nicholas, who helped to put this together. And just to give you a little snippet of the book itself. Here we go.
Loxley's threat hung in the sterile air like poison gas long after the door slammed shut. Dead, deported, death burying you family. The words coiled around Marcus's bruised ribs, tighter than any bandage, squeezing the breath from his lungs. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor now sounded like a countdown to disaster. The hospital, once a place of healing, felt like a trap, a brightly lit cage where questions could descend at any moment, where Loxley's enforcers might appear. Panic, cold and sharp, overrode the throbbing in his shoulder and skull. He couldn't stay, waiting for OSHA, waiting for Loxley's next move, waiting for a bill that would shatter him. It was surrender, and Winston Beckford, buried beneath Marcus Scott, had never surrendered. Not to Clarendon's dirt, not to Norman Manley's scrutiny, not to Brooklyn's cold. He wouldn't start, no. The decision crystallized with terrifying clarity. Check out now. Moving was agony. Every shift sent fire through his separated shoulder. His head swam when he sat up too fast. The world tilted, but terror was a potent anesthetic. He fumbled with the call button, hissing through gritted teeth when the movement jarred his ribs. The nurse arrived, concerned. "Mr. Scott, everything all right? You shouldn't be moving like—" "I need to leave," Marcus interrupted, his voice raspy but firm. "Against medical advice, Amy, whatever you call it. Sign whatever. Me have to go." Her eyes widened. "Mr. Scott, that's incredibly unwise. You have a concussion, a significant shoulder injury. Sign die papers." The command came out harsher than intended, fueled by desperation. He saw Loxley's cold eyes. "Dead, please." Reluctantly, grim-faced, she brought the forms. He scrawled Marcus Scott with a trembling hand, the signature barely legible. He ignored her warnings about risks, infection, permanent damage. Permanent damage was Loxley finding him compliant in this bed. They removed the IV. He refused a wheelchair, shuffling out of the room like an old man, clutching his thin hospital gown around him, the borrowed dignity of the puffy coat and work clothes a world away. He changed back into his street clothes in the bathroom, the simple act of pulling on a shirt, an ordeal that left him sweating and dizzy. He kept the sling, a necessary badge of his plight. He emerged onto the Brooklyn streets, the cold air, a slap, but also a grim liberation. He had no destination, only direction, to get away. Away from Loxley, away from the sight, and away from the suffocating debt. He walked, hunched against the wind, the city's roar, a chaotic soundtrack to his racing thoughts. 6 to 8 weeks. He'd overheard the doctor telling the nurse, 6 to 8 weeks of no wages, of Billy's rent still due, of the hospital bill looming like an onrushing hurricane for certain landfall. There was no chance of returning to Loxley's sight, even healed, as this was unthinkable. The image of the scaffolding, the sickening lurch, the impact, it wasn't just pain, it was the echo of Loxley's threat. He couldn't prove Loxley would harm him, but he couldn't risk finding out. He needed something different, something that would be his, something Loxley couldn't touch. Then the memory surfaced, sharp and fragrant amidst the pain and fear. The heavy Dutch pot back in Clarendon, the rhythmic chopping of onions, scallions, and thyme, the rich enveloping smell of mannish water simmering for hours, the coins clinking into his tin at street dances, the fleeting respect in people's eyes. "You need for you open a restaurant, Winston?" He stopped walking, leaning against a graffiti-tagged bus shelter. Cooking, selling soup, not just a dream stifled by poverty, but a skill, a lifeline. You need to open a restaurant, Winston, right here, right now.
There you go. And so this is Winston Beckford, the Scotch bonnet dreams. Winston learned how to cook when he there at Clarendon, lived with his mother. Of course, his father has died. Father had a heart attack as they might try till the soil in the field where them like a plot of land with them own. So it's just him, his mother, and his sister. And him have to find a way. And so he buy a dead man passport, end up America, and he realized after the accident, boy, I better do something with him know about, which is the cooking thing. And hence he started to do a little soup, selling cook soup and carry it out on the road and sell it. Buy the book, Scotch Bonnet Dreams. Winston is the epitome of who we are as Jamaicans. All we are asking for is a chance. And so Winston takes this opportunity and he turns it into something not just good, but great. Then I'll give you the story, right? But why you go and go buy the book, Scotch Bonnet Dreams, Winston Beckford. You imagine the challenges that he have to go through with trying to find a way in a place where he was a complete stranger, an unforgiving environment. But that is him. And he decides to
One
make a move.
morning, stepping out of the cramped East 91st Street apartment before dawn, the world slapped him, not metaphorically, but physically. The air wasn't just cool, it was a knife, a wet, icy blade that sliced through his thin denim jacket and work shirt like they were tissue paper. It stole his breath, searing his lungs. The wind, sharp and relentless off the unseen ocean, howled down the street, rattling garbage cans and tearing at his exposed face and ears. He gasped, instinctively hunching his shoulders, burying his chin in his collar. His teeth began to chatter uncontrollably. He'd known cold in Jamaica's Blue Mountains, a crisp dampness, but this was different. This was hostile, and with a force that was trying to peel his skin off his bones. Marcus shuffled towards the bus stop, his body rigid. Every step was an effort against the wind's push. The usual crowd huddled there wasn't just waiting. They were armored, puffy coats like inflated sleeping bags, thick scarves wound high over noses, knitted hats pulled low over ears, gloves that looked like they could handle molten steel. Marcus, in his thin jacket, worn jeans, and sight boots, felt like a fool, a shivering, exposed fool. The minutes until the bus arrived felt like hours. His fingers went numb inside his pockets. His ears burned, then went frighteningly cold. The dampness from his own panicked breath fogged uselessly near his face. "This is how people die," a primal voice whispered in his head, frozen on a Brooklyn sidewalk while waiting for a bus. By the time the bus wheezed to a stop, Marcus was shaking violently. He stumbled on, the blast of marginally warmer air inside, feeling like a piece of salvation, yet doing very little to penetrate the deep chill that had settled into his bones. He sat, huddled, trying to rub feeling back into his hands, aware of the pitying or amused glances from the bundled-up passengers. On sight, the cold was a different, with the beastly wind whipping across the open foundation pit with nothing to shield it. Handling cold steel rebar without gloves was agony. The metal...
All right, so that's just another little synopsis from Scotch Bonnet Dreams, one of my newest literary work. Now, Scotch Bonnet Dreams, similar to The Men We Become, is a story about Winston Beckford. Beckford hustles himself out of Jamaica, trying to go see if he can find a little life in a foreign for help him mother and him sister. And so him send back a little money every month so she can find her way. And he has an unfortunate accident and decides that the safest thing to do is to go back to something that he knew. Because if he don't know nothing else, he can cook. His mother taught him that. He used to cook, manage water and curry goat and thing for dance, street dance and thing. And so he decides to fall back on that because that is the skill that him have. And is a typical thing about us as Jamaicans. These stories are about people like you and me, about Jamaicans who only desire is to be able to make a space for themselves after their own efforts. The Jamaican man and woman know how to work hard. And Winston Beckford in Scotch Bonnet Dreams is about working hard. And it ultimately creates a restaurant called Scotch Bonnet Restaurant. I'm going to give you the story by the book. 300 and odd pages of serious drama, right? As the flyer notes here says, in the virulent streets of New York City, Winston, a young Jamaican man, embarks on a perilous journey to seek his fortune. After a harrowing struggle to obtain a dead man's passport, he arrives in early 1990s, only to face the harsh realities of city life. A near-death accident on a construction site forces him to reevaluate his path, and he turns to a traditional Jamaican hustle, a mobile soup kitchen, to survive and to support his family back in Clarendon. As Winston's soup business gains popularity, especially during the harsh winter months, he faces stiff competition and predatory tactics from Loxley, a ruthless mercenary. Undeterred, Winston perseveres and eventually opens his own restaurant, Scotch Bonnet, serving authentic Jamaican cuisine to the city's diverse population. However, his success is threatened by the looming presence of immigration and the numerous challenges that comes with it. Buy the book, right? This is Jamaican storytelling at its best. Let me be honest with you. My mother taught me, God rest her soul, how to tell a story. And I have drawn on more than 30 years of storytelling to bring you this particular story, right? Scotch Bonnet Dreams is about a Jamaican man like myself and how he rises above the challenges to create the Scotch Bonnet restaurant. You are going to enjoy every page-turning second of this read. And of course, you can pick this book up at yardmedia.com. That's YAAWD, yardmedia.com. Just look for the yardmedia.com/books, and I will send you an autographed copy. And of course, you can purchase this as well as on Amazon.com. It is also available as a download. But if you're anything like me, you want to have the book for turn the pages and encourage your friends to think. And so that is the Scotch Bonnet Dreams. And then the last book we're going to talk about is Unbroken, Sheila 2.0. And again, these stories are about us. That's what they are. They're about us Jamaicans. It's about, getting an opportunity and taking it 100%. And so Sheila is, a character that I've taken from an earlier work called The Girl from the Lane, Sheila, the Girl from the Lane. And so this is part 2 of Sheila's story. The character was just an amazing character built up that it made sense that I put the character to work. And so Sheila Salmon is creating a business empire, and she's using all of these tenets. Jamaica is known for its music. Dancehall is big business. And so she found herself with some money, and she invested in selling dancehall outfits in addition to her regular boutique wear. And she's opening stores in Kingston and Portmore, and her latest acquisition is in Montego Bay. And of course, this story, this adventure brings her face to face with the hustlers. It brings her face to face with the extortion. It brings into her ambit a man known as, this is an enforcer who is there for her defense, introduced to her by her baby father. She had 2 children who are now growing into adults. And so it's a really fast-moving story. Let me give you a little taste of Scala, who became her help. In fact, let me give you a little taste of what Sheila is all about.
Sheila Salmon sat by the window of her constant Spring Road office, overlooking the bustling mix of foot and vehicular traffic in the streets below. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the city that had been her home all her life. She traced the rim of her coffee cup with her finger, lost in thought. The decision before her was monumental: how to make the best use of the proceeds of the monetary settlement that she had received. By any stretch of the imagination, this was a huge amount of money, opening her third designer clothing store in a city where dreams were more often deferred than realized. Her thoughts wandered back to that fateful day at Outpost and Company Limited, where she had worked diligently for years. The internal legal issues for which she had almost no involvement had been presented as the reason for her dismissal. Her attorneys were able to put the pieces together and determined the real reason the company had found itself out on a slender limb and needed a scapegoat. And while the just $7.6 million settlement she had received after legal expenses was substantial, it had come at a high emotional cost.
All right, and just as we did
Scala insisted that his father often referred to him as a scalawag, which was a fancy name for a rascal or a thief. He felt that since his father had christened him as such, he had every right to own the name and simply shortened it for ease of pronunciation. By becoming a career criminal, he was simply living up to the name and his father's expectations of him. Scala was 15 years old when his father's body was found at the back of the Coronation Market in Kingston with multiple stab wounds. He was pronounced dead on the scene, and no one was ever charged for his murder. Scala ran away from home a year later and hooked up with Big George, who ran the Patrick City Crew, a gang of 9 youngsters. It was here in the early 1980s that Scala encountered Tony Campbell. Scala at that time was a car thief with surprisingly high driving skills. His ability to navigate Kingston's narrow roads and to find the back streets when it was necessary to evade police made him invaluable. Over time, he had earned respect for his loyalty and cool-headedness under pressure. It was this level-headedness that allowed them to escape from the calamitous robbery scene that fateful morning more than a decade earlier.
Little synopses of each novel, and I will just play.
He looked around his dim apartment, the crooked blinds, the cheap table, the thrift store sofa, and then at the pile of bills. Maybe, he thought, the problem was that he had stayed too long off board. He stood up abruptly, joints protesting, and went to the bedroom. From the bottom drawer of his dresser, under old t-shirts and a wool scarf he never wore, he pulled out a small metal cash box. He kept the key tucked inside his socks, old habits from years of tips and cash jobs. You never let your money sit where people expect it. He opened the box and stared at the contents, a neat stack of bills, mostly in denominations of 20s and 10s, some 5s. He had been saving this slowly, telling himself it was for a rainy day. Outside, New Jersey was rain, snow, and slush for half the year. Inside, he'd been in a storm of another kind for a decade. How much does a rainy day need? He asked the empty room. He began to count. The total was just enough to make the cruise possible if he was careful, if he cut corners, and of course, if nothing unexpected happened. He closed the box and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the familiar tug-of-war inside him. One side was saying, be sensible, stay home, pay down the debt. Don't be stupid at your age. The other side, the quieter but stubborn part, responded, if you don't do something different now, when? When you turn 75. When is only doctor visit and funeral you traveling for? He thought of his children again. Michael, who spoke to him like a partner who had been disappointed too many times. Tanya, who was polite and distant in that way American-born children could be. Shanice, who still tried with him but whose patience was thinning. Maybe, he thought to himself, a man needed to step out of his ordinary life to see himself more clearly. Maybe if he could get his head right, he could start repairing the bridge between him and them. He went back to the table, sat down, and opened the email again. At the bottom, a big blue button said, Book Now. His finger hovered over it. His heart was thudding with an absurd mixture of fear and excitement. Lord, he said softly, half a prayer, half a joke. If this is a bad decision, please make the internet cut off right now. The Wi-Fi held, he clicked.
All right, so that little synopsis there is of the men we become. And so 5 books, we talked about 3 of them today. Check out the website at yardmedia.com. And of course, you're going to click on books. And these books are cheap, $20 thereabouts, under $20. Of course, you pay what's about $5 or depending on how you want it shipped, you pay for shipping. But Scotch Bonnet Dreams, The Men We Become, which is, we just gave you a little preview there of Andrew as he struggled to make up his mind whether or not he should take the cruise. And of course, there is Sheila 2.0 Unbroken. And there are others. There's Sheila, the girl from the lane, which is Sheila 2.0 is actually a sequel. And then there is Top Rankings, the Chronicle of Jamaican Badness. Check out my website. Check out these books. These are Jamaican stories told by yours truly. And and I have only more stories to write, so we have more, But it's important that we write our stories, because when we allow other people to come and tell stories about Jamaica, they might tell Jamaican stories from their own perspective, and then our history gets washed out, watered down, have very little meaning to those of us who were part of the creation of that history. So listen, check out my website. Go and support the thing, support the Jamaican literature, support Jamaican writing, Jamaican authors, and if you have a favorite Jamaican author, buy them book, and talk about it. These books you can also get them on Kindle as downloads, So go out there and make the thing run. Remember, at the end of this month, we have a Jamaica Brew literary festival right here in South Florida, and I will be there with bells on to talk about. In fact, I will be doing a reading from one of my novels. So look forward to seeing you there. And so until the next time when we drop another video, and me, Seaman, Mr. B, check out my site on YouTube at the Jamaica Mix. And if you haven't done so as yet, subscribe to the channel, because that helps us grow. But, I have taken on this job as the master of the culture from a Jamaican standpoint. And so we have to make it work. Big up on yourself. Till next time, I'm me, Seaman, Mr. B, Jagai.